information, this meeting is being recorded, and I guess that's what it says on the screen right now. It's also being broadcasted live on YouTube. So you should be aware that what is being said is being recorded, and it may also be listened to by people who are not in the room right now. So what we'll do today is we'll start off with a couple of short presentations, plenary presentations. We'll also have the opportunity to move into breakout rooms at some point to discuss specific topics, and we will then also come back together to have a plenary discussion. So we'll first start with the first presentation, and we're very happy to have her, Theodora Lukovic, who's a senior evaluator at the DIO, and who was also involved in the evaluation, if I'm not mistaken, or at least her name was also in the evaluation. So the floor is yours, and you have 15 minutes.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
So, as mentioned, I'm Theodora Lukovic. I work at the Directorate of Internal Oversight. Just a very short intro. I have been with the Council for 14 years now. Previously, I worked on project implementation in the organization, and now I've been with the DIO for the past 6 years. And also, I'm joined by my colleague, Helen Nelson, the head of evaluation today. So she's also in the audience. She might jump in or intervene if there are any questions that are more in her remit of work. So without further ado, I will share my presentation. I will do my best to stick to the time, and I apologize in advance if I overrun slightly. Just a second. Oh, bear with me. Share again. Okay, I hope you can see that. Okay. Okay, so I will just start very quickly for those who are not familiar with evaluations and what they are. They are a part of the accountability process in any organization. By our definition and what is contained in our policy and guidelines, it is a systematic and impartial assessment of an activity, project, program, strategy, any other type of work that the organization carries out. It is based on principles that are defined by international standards, in this case, the United Nations Evaluation Group, and the 3 key principles are independence, credibility, and usefulness is what we rely on. These principles are designed to ensure the quality of evaluation, and once we have fulfilled those conditions, we are seeking to achieve accountability and learning in the organization. Sorry, I'm trying to move the slides, but it's not reacting. Okay. A bit about the role of evaluation, again, in the Council of Europe. It is part of the governance system of the organization. It is part of the Directorate of Internal Oversight, as we mentioned, together with audit and investigation. It is based on the independence also of other governance bodies, such as the Budget Committee, the Oversight Advisory Committee, as well as the external audit function of the organization. And we seek to generate knowledge, improve how we do things, and ensure organizational learning as well. And it's supposed to sort of ensure a culture of accountability for achieving results and for using resources more efficiently. We abide by internal and external, or rather internationally accepted standards. As I already mentioned, we have our evaluation policy, which was adopted in 2019. And we also follow the norms and standards issued by UNEG and also the OECD Development Committee. These are the bodies that also issue the criteria that You may already know what we evaluate and what it's based on. We have relevance, coherence, efficiency, effectiveness, impact, and sustainability. And we seek to assess areas of high significance or strategic importance for the organization. Who conducts the evaluations? They're either conducted by us internally, by DAO. We are all trained evaluators, or they're outsourced to external consultants, which was the case with this evaluation. And we also have decentralized evaluations, which are carried out by other administrative entities in the organization. They're the ones that are managing them internally. We are also responsible to ensure quality of the entire evaluation process, including the final report, and we ensure that the recommendations are followed up on. And what I mean by follow-up in terms of how we use the evaluations, we ask for updates from all entities twice per year, and then we review this progress with a draft follow-up report that is sent to the Secretary General. And if we find that there are issues that have not been complied with or addressed, then we flag those issues to the Secretary General. I will now pass on to the actual report, the evaluation of the institution of the Commissioner for Human Rights that was carried out in 2023 and 2024. I will not go into the details that you can see here, and they're part of the report, so I believe you must have seen these, but just to speak about the purpose and objectives in terms of how they were defined. So at the beginning of every evaluation, we have a consultative process with the main counterparts. In this case, that was the Office of the Commissioner. We discuss with them what it is that they want to learn through this evaluation, and then we adjust the purpose and the objectives accordingly. The objective is also based on the mandate of the Commissioner, so whatever is defined as their action of work, that is what we seek to assess, and then the contribution of the Commissioner and how they contribute to that particular objective that they have set out. On the questions, again, you can read them on the slide, but in terms of how we determine the questions, it is this process that is also participatory and inclusive. We discuss it also with the reference group. A reference group is sort of an advisory body that is formed for every evaluation. It is made up of other entities that have a stake in the work of the Commissioner that are somehow involved. So the questions were also defined and approved from their side that these are really the things that we need to know about the work of the Commissioner and the office itself, of course. We just, in terms of criteria, we have all of them except for sustainability, but the key ones being relevance, coherence, efficiency, effectiveness, and impact. On the scope of the evaluation, we focused on the period from 2017 till 2023 in order to encompass the mandates of the third and the fourth Commissioner for Human Rights. And I'm happy to see that one of the former commissioners is in the audience and in the panel this morning. So it's very nice to see Niels again. We have looked at all of the activities implemented by the commissioners, including the country and thematic work, the awareness raising, the role of the Commissioner in the convention system, and then also the role that the Commissioner plays in supporting human rights defenders and national human rights institutions. We also looked into the overall functioning of the Office of the Commissioner, and that is more or less, as you will see later on, where the recommendations are directed. In terms of methodology, it's a theory-based methodology, meaning that we developed a theory of change that we then tested within the evaluation, and that the approach is utilization-focused, meaning that the recommendations really need to be actionable, useful, and operational in the sense of how the evaluation will be implemented in the end, or rather the recommendations of. We had a mixed methods approach, which is pretty standard. Quantitative and qualitative data was collected mainly through a survey and then through a number of interviews. We had four thematic case studies focusing on migration, protection of human rights defenders and women's rights, including gender equality, as these were identified as key priorities of the commissioners that we looked into. And then artificial intelligence, in addition to that, as a sort of a new innovative theme that the last commissioner had chosen to focus on. And we also had four field missions. Two were on-site, two were online, remote. One of them was to visit the island of Lampedusa to particularly assess migration. Another one was to visit the Polish-Belarusian border to also assess the work of the commission that was done there. And then we had also additional two remote visits. One was to Slovenia and one was for the UK. The emerging findings were validated again through the work of the reference group. We agreed on preliminary findings before finalizing them, and then all the data that we collected has been triangulated, meaning that everything that is stated in the report is not a simple basically conclusion made on basis of one person or one source, but rather that several people would have to say the same thing for it to be seen as robust evidence. I will not go into the details of the data collection stakeholders, but you can see for yourself, as I mentioned, we carried out interviews and survey. The response was fairly high. The number of interviews was also sufficient in our view. And that makes us certain that the methodology that we applied and used was robust and that we can stand behind the claims that we make in the report. We had a varied stakeholders group also. You can see the participants on the right-hand slide. In terms of challenges and opportunities, so we really aimed to provide input to the new commissioner who was just beginning their mandate at the beginning of 2024, and to the relatively new director of the office. Now he's been there for a couple of years, but when we started this exercise, it was really the idea to provide as many operational suggestions as possible. A challenge was the fact that we had very diverse stakeholders, so we approached it in an inclusive and participatory way, but this also ensured that, it meant that we also have a very complex and multi-layered environment, and we needed to balance the amount of detail and in order to maintain conciseness in the report. Obviously, what you see is a very much sort of reduced amount of data that you will see presented, but we certainly had a lot more. It's just that we had to stick to the things that are most pertinent and most important findings. You should also bear in mind that we had very limited resources and a very small size of evaluation team. So there was one team leader and one junior evaluator, as well as myself guiding the process. But this was, in the end, it was fine in terms of the robust methodology that we have applied that I've just presented to you. And then we also had time constraints, a very short period for data collection, and then we carried out several activities of data collection in parallel, which is not necessarily the case for all evaluations. So I will get now to the key findings, which is the issue that we're most interested in. So in terms of relevance, we found that the thematic priorities of the commissioners have varied over time in response to evolving contexts, but that the commissioners have retained a long-term vision. There was a clear geographic and thematic prioritization by commissioners, and there was a clear shift also from emphasizing coverage to focus on rapid reactions by the commissioner, the last commissioner. The types of actions that were chosen by the commissioners were consistent with their thematic priorities in our view. In terms of coherence, the commissioner has been engaging to a varying degree with other Council of Europe institutions, but that we found that nevertheless the dialogue is there and it is coherent and complementary. There are also key institutions that remain crucial for this cooperation, which is, of course, the Secretary General, the Committee of Ministers, and the Parliamentary Assembly. We also found that the mandates overall are compatible with similar organizations that the Commissioner closely collaborates with, and the interventions are coherent with the work of the national human rights institutions, but only in those member states that guarantee the independence of these institutions. In terms of effectiveness, the Commissioner has achieved most of their objectives, as stated in our program budget document. They were effective in communicating the human rights issues through their actions in member states, and they have contributed to raising awareness for duty bearers. However, the Commissioner's Office is not invested to define higher results and has limited capacity to monitor the implementation of recommendations that they issue to member states. We also found that the rapid response and the third-party interventions together with the Rule 9 submissions were clearly the most meaningful contribution of the Commissioner. In terms of efficiency, the Office of the Commissioner showed a very high level of adaptability and resilience and staff commitment. This is during rather difficult circumstances and contexts. So over the past years, the Office faced two major changes in terms of management, the new Commissioner and the new Director, but then also externally we had the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, which has sort of not facilitated the work of the Office, but rather made it more difficult. Nevertheless, we found that they have prioritized their work in a very sensible way. In terms of staff mobility and secondments, we also found that the Office of the Commissioner could invest more in filling capacity gaps through other internal mobility schemes in the organization. And then finally, on impact, we found again that the third-party interventions and Rule 9 submissions have contributed to judgments of the court. However, the extent to which this has happened is not possible to establish within this evaluation. The Commissioner's work clearly raised awareness on human rights issues, and the support provided to human rights defenders and civil society through advocacy work was clearly one of the major contributions of the Commissioner. However, we found only indirect impact on the work of the national human rights institutions. In terms of the conclusion,
Theodora, can you almost start wrapping up?
Yeah, I'm approaching my last, so I will not go into the conclusions in any detail. You can see the strengths and the challenges here that they have faced in terms of their work. But ultimately, the Commissioner is seen as a credible source both by governments and civil society. However, we found that the Office of the Commissioner should invest significantly in tracking its results in a more systematic way. And then finally, on the recommendations, again, I will not go into detail, but there were 3 operational and 3 strategic recommendations. I would perhaps single out the first one to define higher level objectives and indicators to demonstrate higher level results. This is to do with impact, and then if this is achieved eventually, then measuring impact will also perhaps be more possible. And then related to that, again, on effectiveness, we suggested to assess ways to systematically track the implementation of the Commissioner's recommendations. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I will stop sharing my screen now. And
yeah, thank you very much, Theodora. And there will be some time after the second presentation for questions for clarification. So keep your questions for a bit, because we will now move on to Claudia Lem of the Commissioners office for a short reaction to the report that was just being outlined really nicely. So the floor is yours, Claudia, and you have about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lise, and hello to everybody. It's a pleasure to see you online for this event. I thank you for the invitation also and your interest in the work of the Commissioner. I would like to address in the 10 minutes that are given to me the main features of the mandate. I would like to reiterate those, and also the priorities of the current Commissioner to conclude with some concluding remarks indeed. So when it comes to the main features of the mandate, I mean, as you all know, the institution was created by a Committee of Ministers resolution 25 years ago. So we are celebrating the 25th anniversary, or we celebrated it last year. And this is important keywords, I think, for the mandate. They created it as an independent, as an impartial, as a non-judicial institution. And when we say non-judicial institution, we mean that the Office of the Commissioner cannot act upon individual complaints. The institution is mandated to foster observance of human rights and assist member states in the implementation of the Council of Europe human rights standards, to promote education in and awareness of human rights, and also to identify shortcomings in law and practice and make recommendations basically on all these topics. A second feature of the mandate of the Commissioner, for me, that is quite essential, is the word cooperation. I mean, there is cooperation with several institutions. That is first in-house with other bodies of and institutions and mechanism of the Council of Europe, but also with a broad range of international institutions, as well as human rights monitoring mechanisms, leading human rights NGOs, universities, and think tanks. So we have both internal and external cooperation as an important feature, I think, of the mandate. And indeed, the current Commissioner intends to strengthen the cooperation with human rights institutions, and he did so, he started to do so, not least at the 25th anniversary event that we had last year, where the institutions were invited and could discuss together how to cooperate more in the field of human rights. A third feature of the Commissioner's institution, I would say, is a special rules divided into three, I would say. And the first one is indeed has to do with the contact with the European Convention on Human Rights System. I mean, Theodora, you mentioned indeed the third-party interventions by the Commissioner that is possible for the Commissioner to do on his or her own initiative, and also the possibility to submit Rule 9 communications to the Committee of Ministers when this is about supervision of the judgments that were taken by the European Court of Human Rights. In fact, to give you an example of recent activity in this regard, when it comes to third-party intervention, the Commissioner O'Flaherty submitted written submission, and oral intervention will be also submitted next week in the cases concerning summary returns of asylum seekers from Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland to Belarus. So this is a recent example of how the interaction, if you want, with the European Convention on Human Rights System takes place. The second role of the Commissioner, special role, if you want, is clearly with respect to human rights defenders, indeed. This is very important, supporting them, engaging with them, exchanging information with them, supporting them, and also, I would say, contributing to creating an enabling environment for their work. This is very important for the Commissioner. And then there is the third role of the Commissioner, that is with its contact with national human rights institutions. Here again, they are key partners, and the Commissioner will also support their work and engage with them in his own work. A fourth feature of the Commissioner's office and the mandate is what I would say an agile and flexible Commissioner's mandate. This is the words of the Commissioner O'Flaherty recently. So agile and flexible commissioners mandate. Why do we see this like that? Because first of all, there is this aspect of rapid response that Theodora mentioned also in her presentation. And to give you an example, recent example again of this, when in Georgia there was a draft law on transparency of foreign influence that was discussed in the parliament. The commissioner was just arrived in the office. It was in April 2024, and he sent a letter to the parliament about this topic, expressing his concerns, his human rights concerns on this draft law. Another example is the commissioner going in September, if I'm not mistaken, to Poland for a visit at the border with Belarus in view of developments that occurred there, also in terms of legislative developments. And he also sent letters about this topic to the Polish government and the parliament over the summer last year. Agile and flexible mandate also means that we have a variety of tools at our disposal. I already mentioned some of them: visits, letters, statements, organizing events, third-party interventions, Rule 9 submissions, etc. I mean, I'm not going to develop this further, but there is a variety of tools available for the commissioner. Also, I would like to mention here the role of the commissioner when it comes to situations in the gray zones, what we call the gray zones, the areas of conflict. There, the commissioner can use the variety of tools at disposal. And I would give a recent example of the situation in and around the Karabakh region, where Commissioner Mijatovic published a memorandum about the question without going to the country. So it was based on online discussions and desk research. And then also Commissioner Mijatovic went to Karabakh region in October 2023 and thereafter published observations on the basis of her visits both to Armenia and Azerbaijan, including Karabakh region. Also, an important element is that the mandate has independence in taking decisions. So that's decisions on what? On the thematic priorities, on situation and countries to be visited and otherwise covered. So for us, it's important that the mandate as such is efficient and shouldn't be necessarily changed. Also, in the Reykjavik Declaration, the member states, they committed to strengthen the institution, and this was done through increased budget and human resources. And this is also the view strongly held by the Commissioner and his office. Strengthening, including for the future, should be in this form. The mandate already provides for everything the institution needs to be impactful and effective. And also the current commissioner, if I may quote Commissioner O'Flaherty again, said on the 25th anniversary event, the institution is an individual with modest capacity, but with a clear and strong mandate. And the DIO recommendations that we have seen just before also seem to indicate that we have all the necessary tools at disposal. And there's no specific recommendation on that aspect. Now, a quick word on the priorities of the Commissioner before I make my concluding remarks. I mean, the priorities of Commissioner O'Flaherty are fourfold. One is, the first one is defending the rights of the people of Ukraine. And this is why the first official visit of Commissioner O'Flaherty was to Kiev. A second priority is addressing contemporary challenges to human rights protection, embedding human rights in the great issue of the day, if you want. And that includes topics such as environment and human rights, social rights, migration and human rights, and artificial intelligence and human rights. A third priority is protecting and promoting the rights of marginalized and forgotten people, with a special attention right now for the situation of Roma and travelers. And fourth priority, ensuring the protection of human rights defenders. That is indeed among the special roles of the Commissioner. So to conclude, Currently the office is working with a stronger focus on strategy based also on the DIO recommendations, a stronger focus on strategy and capitalizing on the specific added value of the institution. A number of initiatives and changes in the way of working were implemented or started to be developed. And as indicated in the management response and action plan in reply to DIO recommendations, a strategic planning unit was established to support an internal strategy planning process to deliver on the Commissioner's priorities. We have also advanced in the process of adapting the structure of the office to better reflect and support the Commissioner's priorities that I just mentioned. In 2025, the office will continue the implementation of the management response and action plan, which accepted all DIO recommendations. And we welcome your interest in the work of the institutions and your readiness to contribute to amplifying the voice of rights in Europe through strengthening the work of the Commissioner. At the same time, it is very important to be clear about the fact that my presence here does not imply necessary endorsement by the Commissioner and his office of any of the conclusions that you may reach, proposals that you may make. My role here was more to introduce the institution and its mandate, as you have heard, as well as the priorities of the current Commissioner. As you will understand, I cannot necessarily endorse and maybe also not comment any of the proposals that you will make today or later, and I cannot speak for the Commissioner nor the office without having consulted them, but I will be listening very carefully to any of the things that you will say afterwards. I will stay with you and be able to listen to questions also. So I'm available to reply to any questions, and I look very much forward to our continued cooperation. And there I can speak for the Commissioner and the office, and they also look very much forward to continuing cooperating with you, because it is very important that civil society, that human rights defenders work together hand in hand with us. We consider you as crucial partners, and we want to work together for a better protection of the human rights across Europe. So I thank you very much, and I wish you all the best for this event and also for your work in general. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you too, Claudia, for this very nice presentation, and also the points that you made at the end were duly noted, and we of course understand these points. We're very happy to have you here. We now have some times for questions to either Theodora or Claudia or both. Please put your questions in the chat and also say to whom you'd like to address the question. And to be sure, these questions are supposed to clarify certain points. So if you're still not sure about, well, the evaluation, the content, the management response, for example, ask your questions in the chat. We will be later discussing, the input, so what we think that can still be done. So the questions that you can pose now are really in order to gather more information about the whole evaluation. And there's a question from Konstantin Baranov to Theodora. Could you please elaborate a bit more on the findings and recommendations that you've highlighted? And there's another question for Theodora. I guess she can answer these two questions in one go, by Andrew Ford. Is an external evaluation foreseen at any point? So this is indeed also a really nice, question for clarification. So Theodora, the floor is yours. And Hannah, can you perhaps also put your question in the chat?
Shall I start or?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Konstantin, for your question. So what I gather you're more interested in is to understand a bit more about what we mean by higher level results and goals. So basically this relates to the question of impact, and the way that impact is currently defined for the Office of the Commissioner is at a level that is not measurable. There are no indicators for it. And so in that sense, we would like to see, and this is the recommendation one that we have made, how the Office of the Commissioner would define its higher level objectives. So I will have a quick look at the theory of change, but at the moment, the higher level impact is to ensure human rights for all and that their universality is maintained. And then at lower level impact, we have that member states fulfill their obligations under the European Convention of Human Rights, and that there is a higher awareness of and respect for human rights in member states. So to do this and to measure this is extremely difficult to do. So this is where the recommendation came from, and this is what we're aiming to clarify, especially in the program budget document of the Council of Europe. And then the one way of doing that is to track how the recommendations are implemented, and that there's an effectiveness question. And we hope that once that the office has that information at hand, they will be able to better define their results. I hope that answers more or less your question. And then to Andrew, thank you for the question. As far as the Council of Europe is, the DIO is concerned, and in terms of evaluation standards, this is an external evaluation. My involvement there as evaluation manager is more in an administrative capacity. We don't influence what the consultants will write. So ultimately, it is their decision. The process is inclusive. So as I mentioned, there was a reference group for the evaluation made up of all stakeholders that are somehow in any way involved with the work of the commissioner. They made their comments, and then the consultants are ultimately free to decide whether they accept these comments or not. So in terms of external, meaning independent, as far as we are concerned, and by international standards, this is certainly considered an external evaluation. There's another question, but I don't know if I should answer it now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So have you read it already? So it's
no, sorry. I'll just have a quick look.
Okay. Yeah, I can also shortly summarize it. So the report says that the commissioner has no monitoring function.
Yeah.
And Anka is saying, well, this could perhaps weaken the position of the commissioner, and the website says that the commissioner also evaluates the human rights situation. So how come the report says that the commissioner has no monitoring function, even though this may weaken the position of commissioner, and you could perhaps read something else on the website?
Well, perhaps Claudia is better placed to answer that question. I can just say that the proposal we made in that sense is really to track recommendations in an internal way, in a very operational way. So when we say monitoring in the Council of Europe, we mean something else. And that is certainly not what we're implying with this evaluation. So just to make clear, the commissioner doesn't have a monitoring mandate, nor should it. We didn't look into that, but we are just suggesting that internal processes should turn some attention to following up on the work that is being done in a, as I say, very operational manner. But I will let Claudia expand on that if she wishes to.
Yeah, do you want to add anything, Claudia, to that?
Thank you. Well, it's indeed depends how you define monitoring function, and if this is the way Theodora and the DIO define monitoring function, like monitoring mechanism that you have, like ECRI maybe, or other mechanism in the Council of Europe. Yes, we have a broader mandate, if you want. This is not about cycles of monitoring. The commissioner is not maybe bound by this. This is what I would understand when the DIO says the commissioner has no monitoring function, but maybe I'm wrong in also understanding this, and this is why it doesn't prevent the commissioner from monitoring the situation in a country, but this is not like in the mandate, if you want, of the commissioner to have the same functions as a body like ECRI and the Framework Convention Advisory Committee. But this is maybe how I understand it. I'm not sure this is exactly the way it should be understood.
Well, I hope that this has clarified something for you, Anka. There's one more question in the chats by Hannah, and I guess that Claudia would be best placed to answer that question. So the question is, how do you react in case of a lack of information from the government? How does the commissioner work around that? So, for instance, in the issue of suspension of the rights of asylum. So what to do if the government basically doesn't give any information?
Well, I mean, let's speak in abstract. I mean, we have several sources of information when we are informed about a situation, a human rights violation, or we have a concern about a draft law. We have several sources, public sources, open sources, and as I mentioned before, civil society and human rights defenders. And then we would use any of the tool that is available in the toolbox of the commissioner to address the government and ask for information, but also ask for a change in the legislation, for instance, if this is the situation, or in the practice, and point at the allegations that were made in this respect, and point to, and I think this is important, to how things should be improved in that case. So we address the governments in all cases, basically.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see any other questions. I'm just scrolling through them. I think we've covered them all. Thank you, Claudia and Theodora, also for taking the time to answer these questions. I would now like to move on to two other presentations or initiation of the discussion, perhaps a bit more informal. And the first will be given, and was mentioned already, we're happy to have him too, Niels Mussnieks. And he was the Commissioner for Human Rights from 2012 until 2018. And the last year of his last mandate was also covered by this evaluation. And he's currently a UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Belarus. So Niels, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's good to see a lot of old friends on the screen here. Yes, I should probably preface my remarks by saying that I was also evaluated. So or at least part of my mandate was evaluated. I think it's one thing that should be taken into account in reading that is that my last year was evaluated, whereas not my full mandate, and that makes a difference. Let me start by saying I think it's really great that there's interest in both academic and civil society interest in looking more closely at the work of the commissioner, because there's been very little actually research published on the commissioner's work over the last 25 years. I think if you do a search through various databases, you won't find a whole lot. Interestingly, Alvaro Gil Robles, the first commissioner, has written his memoirs, but they're only available in Spanish. And apparently, several researchers just did a series of interviews with Thomas Hammarberg on his memories, but those will be published in Swedish. I've just written about my own time as commissioner as part of a broader memoir I'm writing, but I haven't yet published it. So hopefully that will provide those interested with some more insights into what the commissioner is thinking, what their strategy is, and so on. I just want to reiterate a point that Claudia made. I think it's very good that people want to enhance the work and impact of the commissioner's office, but I totally agree that the mandate should not be touched. The mandate is fine. It's sufficiently flexible that the commissioner can do whatever he or she wants. And I fear that opening it up would be incredibly risky in the current political climate. Another thing is that the commissioner historically and his team has jealously guarded their independence. They don't like really to be told what to do, and the instinctive response is to defend the independence of the office and say, "We'll consider it." And that's about as much as you're going to get from the commissioner's office, I think. A few comments linked to the observations in the evaluation. There was some talk about coherence and cooperation between the commissioner's office, the secretary general, and PACE. I think I would just note that it takes two to tango. For example, secretary generals in the past have not always understood how to work with the commissioner for human rights because the commissioner is one of the few individuals who's not in the chain of command of the secretary general. And there have even been some cases in the past of some jealousy on the part of the SG towards the commissioner. I would also say that SGs are not always prioritizing defensive defense of the highest human rights principles or standards, they have to cut political deals, and they sometimes go for win-win political situations, and this can create tensions between the between the commissioner and the SG. I think if you look at my work when I was commissioner on Turkey and on Hungary, and compare it with the work and statements of the SG, you'll see there's a pretty big difference. The same holds true with the Parliamentary Assembly. Parliamentary Assembly, when I look back at what did the Parliamentary Assembly say on human rights backsliding in Hungary? Very little until very late. And it was a commissioner, my predecessor actually, who sounded the alarm bell first, and so on. So if you're looking for coherence between PACE, the Secretary General, and the Commissioner, be careful what you wish for, because if coherence means a lowering of the standards on the, defended by the Commissioner, I don't think that's a result that we're looking for. I think there's a role for both, for all of these institutions to play, and there needs to be intensive communication. But as I said, it takes several to tango. You can't do it by yourself. Cooperation with outsiders. I would just note that almost all the major regional and international organizations dealing with human rights are in serious crisis mode. Council of Europe might actually be best placed of anybody. You look at the UN, which I'm working with now, huge liquidity crisis, can't do a lot of the work that it's supposed to be doing just because there's no money, and the big players are not really engaging. The OSCE as well is riven by divisions. Often it's paralyzed. The EU has can do useful work, monitoring work. You have FRA, and you have the Ombudsman's office to look, but basically, who's going to call out EU governments when they're engaging in problematic migration practices, for example? The EU is certainly not going to do it, or it's not going to do it very loudly. So the partners, cooperation with others is a mixed bag. I was really interested to read that rapid reaction is seen as much more prominent in Dunya's mandate, because I thought that's what I was doing with regard to Ukraine during Maidan, with Crimea, with Donbass, with the Syrian refugee crisis, with backsliding in Hungary, Poland, Russia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. So maybe I didn't do it as much in my last year, but when I look back at my mandate, I see that we did a whole lot of rapid reaction. So I was a bit struck by that comment. Regarding operations in conflict zones, Andrew Ford knows my stance on this. I shared it at a big conference he organized in Galway. If anybody's interested, I did my presentations on my LinkedIn site. Basically, there are huge challenges to working in conflict zones. Challenges of getting access. There are very few civil society organizations and media outlets in these conflict zones or gray zones, and you have to deal with the huge sensitivities of the parent state that often don't want you to do work there. My conclusion is that it requires a huge effort. It's a high-risk proposition, and you have very limited human rights impact. So just to feed into that discussion that's going to happen in the working groups. Yeah, I'll stop there. Just my 2 cents, but thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for these very insightful points. We'll now have one other short presentation, someone who was already mentioned, Andrew Ford. He is a commission member of the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lise, and thanks to everybody. Good to see you all. This is a great opportunity. It's always good to take an opportunity to speak about an institution as significant as the Commissioner for Human Rights, and the report is really very interesting and important, though I think it's been said already by Niels, it's been said by everybody actually, that it's both temporally and I think qualitatively limited, and that's not a criticism, it's just an objective fact. One thing though I would point to, and this is the inspiration, Theodora, probably for my question to you about, is it really independent? because one of the key points, and I think we need to spell this out, that isn't clearly articulated in the report, is the question of cooperation in good faith by member states. And that's a key factor when assessing, I think, the effectiveness of this institution. Yes, it's referred to, but it's, for me, obviously, as far as I'm concerned, far, far more significant than it appears in the report. What the report does say, though, and that's clear, and I think we all agree, is that this is a unique and a crucial institution. There's enormous expertise been built up in a very small, very dedicated team, significant experience across a huge range of issues and contexts, from, you know, dealing with discrimination to migrants' rights, places of detention, conflict zones, as Niels mentioned, not to even speak about then third-party interventions, Rule 9s, and all these things that are stepping up as far as I can see. And there's been an evolution over time, you know, in the mandate. I mean, it's interesting when you think back to when Alvaro Gil Robles took the mandate first, and it was, I mean, from my perspective, much more kind of conservative approach to the mandate at a different time, of course. He would hardly have imagined a situation where his successor, later successor, Dunja Mijatovic, would basically be spending half of her mandate conducting her business virtually. And that's just the one aspect of the changing nature, I think, of the reality on the ground. But each commissioner had massive challenges to deal with. Sadly, what they all faced, I think, is that many member states see the commissioner still as an adversary rather than an ally. And that's one of the biggest fallacies, I think, that we face in the Council of Europe system, because actually the commissioner represents a unique tool to support governments improving, improving the lives and the livelihoods of people. And it is empirically beyond doubt that states that pursue policies based on equality, non-discrimination, human rights, democracy, rule of law, they generally tend to be more socially cohesive, politically stable, economically prosperous. I'm generalizing, but generally speaking, that is the case. Anyhow, but to not take too long, I want to just kind of build on what's been said and add a few more points. The first point, as I've just muted to earlier, but I want to repeat, is that effectiveness is directly proportionate to political will. Okay, that's not to say that an awful lot doesn't depend. An awful lot depends on the management and strategic direction of the office, of the commissioner, him or herself. But we have to emphasize this issue of good faith engagement by member states. When it comes to the overarching recommendation on the issue of defining higher level objectives and indicators to demonstrate higher level results, it's very understandable. But one must really ask the question, would it not be more effective to look at what we already have? And that is to say, the recommendations over now decades related to specific countries, and to use them as our indicators for follow-up, and to maybe find a more innovative way to trace implementation through things like heat maps, traffic light systems, whatever that can, almost visually show us progress or lack thereof when it comes to member states' follow-up. When it comes to the question of engagement between the commissioner and other institutions, I think it's, the engagement between the commissioner and the CM, which is obviously in camera, and the pace is public, generally speaking, in terms of the engagement at the part sessions. That's a really unique opportunity for the commissioner to be persuasive. It's in a sense, it's his or her main tool, and engagement sometimes, from what we see, can be tense. But that is something I would say is okay. We should really embrace that bit of tension. I mean, without the friction, we won't have the movement. So I think it's really important that there is obviously that balance continues to be struck. Niels referred a minute ago to the question of that engagement between the SecGen and the commissioners. Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that observation. I think you could also extend it out further, probably to the heads of monitoring bodies, the court, and so on and so forth. It's really, I think, important that those relationships are cultivated, not from an efficiency point of view, as in to avoid monitoring missions happening within weeks of each other, which I know was a problem in the past at some points, but also to just to ensure that there's, you know, a more complementarity around advocating for various recommendations. Resources. Yes, the resources of the office have increased, but I think it's, you know, objectively from a fairly low base. The Commissioner's office is doing fantastic work with very few people, and more can be done if there are more resources. And I think that is one of the manifestations of political will if states can consider, you know, what is right size, what is right sizing the Commissioner's office? What does that look like? As regards the question of access, this is something that we will speak about probably in a parallel session in a minute, but it has been an issue, you know, has been an issue in many countries, not just Russia, where Nils was effectively persona non grata. I think it's fair to say, Nils, you might correct me if I'm wrong with that, but it's not just there. You know, there's been limitations on the Commissioner in Turkey and Moldova and Georgia and loads of places, all of a different kind of scale. So I'm not comparing them necessarily to what Russia did, but I think that needs to be called out more decisively. You know, that needs to be traced and mapped and brought to the CM more decisively. Maybe it happens. We don't know because we don't see exactly what happens at the CM. When it comes to then the sort of question around reactivity and so on, yeah, like I think commissioners have been reactive, but it's always a question of perspective. And this question of prioritization will always be something that people can criticize because we have different interests, we see different issues with a different level of priority. But certainly, it seems to me that there's opportunities for more synergies between the Commissioner and other aspects of the Council of Europe. Like, for example, when it comes to education, which I think is one area where the Commissioner's mandate, again, objectively, has been probably not as developed as others. You know, people may disagree, but that's my perception. You know, the HELP program, the Ocean Network, all of these kinds of these are all avenues, I think, for the Commissioner to not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but to build on what's been done. So I suppose just to conclude, because I don't want to take too much time. I mean, the mandate is clearly needed now more than ever. I think the Reykjavik Declaration was clear. People in the Commissioner's office must have been celebrating with the language. It's extremely strong. But how do we make that? How do we realize that commitment in practice? And I think just before we wrap up and go to the groups, I want to invite you just to think about a couple of things. Like, what is the Commissioner's added value proposition now? Is it the same as it was in 1999, or is it something different? We're seeing clearly a shrinking space for civil society, and this certainly extends to international human rights advocacy. So we need to think about that. What actions can be taken by the Commissioner now that will strengthen the resilience, the agility, the effectiveness of the institution for the future? And I accept what has been said about the mandate being strong. It is extremely strong when you think about what it says, but it is very weak when you think about what it is. It's a resolution that can be changed or rescinded, you know, with the stroke of a pen by the Committee of Ministers. So we need to think a bit more long term, I think, also. You know, if there's going to be a situation where the statute of the Council of Europe is ever to be reformed, which I think is probably required based on the whole process of expulsion of Russia, but that's a different conversation. Should the Commissioner be foreseen explicitly in the statute? On the other hand, I understand that if you touch the mandate or you touch the statute, could that all result in regression? Another issue to consider is the question of thought leadership. To what extent should we think about the Commissioner focusing more energy on shaping the normative direction of the Council of Europe? Issues related to rights and the environment, artificial intelligence, and so on. This has been discussed already, but it's certainly something to think about. But lastly, and most important of all, regardless of what priorities are pursued, how do we ensure that this institution is effective as an outcome measure for people on the ground, real people, not efficient in an econometric sense? I'm sure we're going to discuss about all these issues in the breakout rooms, but I just want to conclude and say that, look, we need to champion this institution. Now more than ever, that includes activists, advocates, policymakers, academics, and so on. It's a unique asset, and it should be seen as such also by the member states. So congratulations to all of you who have made the institution what it is, and I'm looking forward to the discussion in the breakout rooms. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. And we're indeed now going to the breakout rooms. Sergei has put the 4 breakout rooms in the chat. The last one, interaction with civil society, will stay in the main room, meaning that that breakout room will be live streamed on YouTube. There is a note taker for each session, but please make sure to also appoint a spokesperson for each of the breakout rooms so we can, once we get back together in the main room, you can tell what has been discussed in these separate breakout rooms. And we have about 25 minutes. I think you'll be sent back automatically to this main room once the discussion, or once these 25 minutes have been reached. So I think Sergei will now give you the option to choose.
Yeah, so I think you should see already, and you can also choose your group.
I can't see it yet, but it may just be me, because I do see, yeah, I do see it, join a breakout room. Yeah.
I will be also sharing the questions so for each breakout room, so just for the moderators, so because we also have in moderators. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have a note taker, right, for cooperation with other Council of Europe bodies. So I'll be joining that one to take notes. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
I'd like to join that as well. I just don't know how.
Okay, I will be sending you there, Nils. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Dear colleagues, those of you who are staying in the main room, if you do so, it means that you chose to join the group number 4, interaction with civil society and human rights defenders. Yeah, so probably someone will be still going, leaving this room to join another one, but I think we will start in the meantime because we don't really have a lot of time. The cooperation with the external stakeholders, including human rights defenders and civil society groups, was already mentioned as something quite important to the work of the commissioner, also by Claudia. There are different aspects there that we could discuss. I will try to share the slide with the questions that we could be thinking of. But in general, as any other cooperation, it is the idea is that it is a two-way street. And on the one hand, there are things that the commissioner can do for civil society, including support, protection, and creation of enabling environment, as it was mentioned before. But also, there are different ways in which civil society, human rights defenders, people like us can support the work of the commissioner. Okay, I think I can share screen now. Once you see the questions, or if you already have any thoughts on the issue based on your own experience in interacting with the commissioner, with the commissioners, the different commissioners that held the mandate at different times, please share these experiences, share your thoughts on what could be done better, differently, what things could be improved in this interaction with civil society. Do you see the screen, the slide with questions now? Okay. Anyone has a comment on these questions? If you do, please don't be shy. There are not so many of us in this group, so it would be good to.
Maybe I can break the ice.
Yeah, great. Please do that.
Yeah, Ferdinando from Italy. I mean, your questions brought me to think about a recent case that we had here in Italy, where the commissioner brought to the president of the Senate because the parliament is currently discussing a bill that will, among other things, will restrict the right to protest. And from what I saw, it seems to me that the commissioner looks a sort of one-stop shop, in the sense that once the commissioner has communicated with the national parliament, his work is over. So maybe my point will be to create a sort of follow-up. So the commissioner should not, let's say, exhaust his duties, his activity by reacting once, but by showing his or her continuous interest on a specific issue, and by doing so, he should be in constant contact both with the national institutions concerned and with civil societies, especially with the ones who have stimulated his intervention, and this would support his efficiency and his effectiveness, as the last speaker was saying.
Thank you for raising this, for flagging this issue of follow-up and opportunities to improve that. I can see that we also have the questions now in the conference chat, if it's easier for you to read them this way. And I see that Karen has a hand. Karen, please proceed.
Hi, Konstantin. I was in Strasbourg last week with a group of colleagues from Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. We met Commissioner and Secretary General and other people concerning the situation in Turkey. And one of the proposals we forwarded to Secretary General, but I think it can also apply to the Commissioner's office, to create a platform similar to the protection of journalists, about human rights defenders. So to see and urgently intervene when human rights defenders under threat by different regimes. So it might be a good option for the Human Rights Commissioner's office to stay in constant relation with human rights groups in different countries, especially in the ones where human rights defenders under threat and risk. So that might be a proposal that can cure can make to the office of the Human Rights Commissioner.
Yes, thank you for bringing this up. Actually, well, we at CURE also had a similar proposal for some time already, and it's well, it's a relatively it exists for a long. It was there for a long time, even before our campaign was created. Even this recommendation was contained in some of the PACE resolutions before. But unfortunately, until now, this was never materialized. So let's hope this will happen at some point. I can see that Hannah is willing to speak now. Hannah, please.
I'm sorry, very quickly, Konstantin. Can someone send me to breakout room 3? I didn't get the chance to choose a breakout room. Mobile, maybe. Thank you.
Okay, can I? Well, let me make a reference to the recommendation on protecting the defenders, and I think that this recommendation should be better. Let's say should be better distribute, or the information about this recommendation is almost, well, unknown. And it is extremely important because now in Poland there is a very difficult case pending before the criminal court of 5 people with the criminal charges for the humanitarian action addressed to migrants. And in the third intervention before the European Court of Human Rights, the Commissioner paid attention to this case. But I think that it was just very small notice about this case, and there is lack of reference to this important soft law, but very important. And I think that it is extremely important to promote and to disseminate, promote such recommendations and to disseminate knowledge about this recommendation. It will be also very important for the courts, at least for Polish courts, that there is a certain standards regarding the humanitarian actions of the human rights defenders.
Thank you, Hannah. Could you please specify which particular recommendation do you refer to?
I'm talking about the recommendation protecting the defenders, ending repression of human rights defenders, assisting refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants in Europe. This recommendation, well, was adopted in 2024. So it is.
It was published by the Office of the Commissioner, right?
Yes. The
okay,
Office of the Commissioner. Yeah.
And it's specifically on defenders working protecting migrants and
exactly.
Okay. It's clear now. Thanks. So a call to better disseminate and promote this kind of documents that the Commissioner's office is issuing. Kerem, something to add?
Yeah. And another thing that I would like to raise is Human Rights Commissioner's office might have closer relations with NGOs on which case to intervene as a third party or to make Rule 9s, because it's quite difficult for the office to follow which case is critical for the relevant country. So it might be good to create a transparent conversation with NGOs in supporting office work on Rule 9s and third-party interventions, propose some critical.
Okay. Karen, it seems that you froze, but I think we actually got the idea. just thinking if this is probably also should be addressed to civil society itself, that well, we and our colleagues could be more active in actually approaching the commissioner and the office with suggestions of this kind. Yeah, actually attracting the attention to the most emblematic cases where before the court, where we think that the commissioner's intervention could play an important role. There is also, I mean, of course, I mean, we in this small group that we have very well, probably different experiences of interacting with the commissioners and the commissioner's office. Just maybe to give a bit more context, if you we included the question on the formats of interaction. Of course, the commissioners are traditionally meeting civil society and individual human rights defenders during country visits. Sometimes, well, as Kerem mentioned, colleagues visited Strasbourg, request meetings with the commissioner at the headquarters of the Council of Europe. And there are sometimes special events when they're organized by the commissioner's office to bring together groups of human rights defenders, usually working on some particular topic and discuss issues and challenges with them. This is like the so-called series of so-called roundtables with human rights defenders, and every time such roundtable is held, there is also some written report published, and they are available on the commissioner's webpage. But other than that, can you think of any other formats of interacting with civil society that could be useful in addition or maybe instead of what there is at the moment? This is also something probably to think about in the time we have. Or if you have any other additional thoughts and suggestions, please don't hesitate to share. Yeah, Sergey reminds us that in 9 minutes the groups will reconvene here in the main room. If there are no more thoughts at the moment, well, you can share at any time within these 9 minutes. Still, Ferdinando, I see you.
Maybe, yeah, thank you. Maybe going back to what was said about the selection of the Rule 9 submissions for the amicus curiae of the commissioner. One point would probably be to increase the cooperation with national civil society during the preparation of the submission or the amicus curiae. So the exchange of information maybe should be stronger. The commissioner should probably stimulate more reactions from civil society in order to gather more data, more information to propose them in the submission or in the amicus curiae. That sometimes maybe the data are taken from open source or maybe the investigation is not as deep as it should be.
Do you have any actual experience?
No, in practical terms, no. But I mean, by reading them, sometimes when it seems that they really don't go very deep into the specific concrete issue within the member state.
I see.
The data are not very updated or they're not very detailed. And in my opinion, this can weaken a bit the position of the commissioner, both before the member state concerned and before the committee or the court, because it could be more supportive, as the role is somehow neutral, so it's not partisan. The more I am informative, the more I can support a decision, because it's considered to be more objective.
I see. Yeah, thank you. I think it's clear as a recommendation. I also want to ask a question. I mean, to which extent you are, I mean, colleagues working in different countries are using actually or referring to the different documents that the commissioner produces on your countries, like the country visits reports, there's well, third-party interventions to the court on cases, Rule 9 submissions. Do you find them useful in your advocacy efforts at the national level? Well, how do you think widely they are known among your civil society colleagues, and is there any room for improvement there? Yeah, Ferdinand,
in my opinion,
answer that. Yeah,
in my opinion, in Italy, the commissioner is not very well known. So probably a campaign, a sort of a campaign for civil society would support his work in the long run, because civil society will know better that the commissioner exists, that they can interact with the office and ask for support or provide support. But generally speaking, in my opinion, only very few CSOs know that the office exists, and interact, and fewer of them interact with him or her.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Maybe colleagues from other countries have other experiences that you would like to share. Anna, yes, please go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, I share the same view as my colleague from Italy, and but there is a chance to inform public opinion about the activity of the commissioner in case of, for instance, of pending very well-known criminal procedures about the issue on LGBT rights, and and this is the way where, with the support of the office of the commissioner, we have a room to organize a kind of campaign through media and to talk based on a concrete situation, based on concrete reactions. And well, this is also a task for us, not only for the commissioner, for the commissioner office, but what is absolutely important, it is the personal visit of the commissioner in the member states. And then we are talking about the financial means for the commissioner office, but this kind of visits, are important also for human rights defenders. And that is why, we should pay more attention to the budgetary framework of the commissioner office.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have like 3 minutes remaining. We also need to choose one person who would be presenting a summary of what was said in our group to the others. And are there any volunteers to do that? I don't know, maybe Ferdinando, Johanna, or Kerem, you were raising several suggestions, so maybe one of you could help us with the presentation.
Ferdinando is perfect. Well,
but no, we cannot appoint someone if the person does not.
Thank you. Actually, I didn't know it before, so I didn't take notes.
We should have some notes. Sergey, are you taking notes in our group?
Because I just thought that the point is, one is the follow-up with CSOs, and then the second is the to formalize the cooperation with them, no, in order to better improve the effectiveness, of the action of the commissioner. I mean, those are the two main ideas that I got from
and better dissemination of the commissioner recommendations. For instance, protecting the defenders.
The thematic recommendations in this case. There was what Kerem brought up was also this suggestion of creating a platform monitoring the situation of civil society space and human rights defenders, which may be similar to the existing platform that the Council of Europe has on the safety of journalists. And then there were specific suggestions from you, Ferdinando, and from Kerem about commissioners' work with the court and with the execution of court judgment, and how civil society could be more involved in these in the preparation of these third-party interventions and Rule 9 submissions.
Okay, who are going to present? So because I need to close breakout rooms now.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you together with others in a second.
Yeah, so I think so. So we have now 1 minute to go. So who's going to present?
So,
well, Ferdinando was
very democratically.
You did not object. You kind of reacted positively, as I understand.
Ferdinando, there is a term forced volunteers. So you are forced volunteers.
This is probably not the best existing practice for forced volunteers. But still.
Welcome back, everyone. I think everyone was sent back. We were still in the midst of a very interesting discussion, but of course we always have too little time for these things. Anyways, I would like to invite the spokespersons for each of the breakout rooms to give a very short summary of what has been discussed. Starting with the first breakout room was actually the room that was the main room, so the interaction with civil society. Who can I give the floor for a quick summary?
Ferdinando was preparing to speak on the behalf of the group.
Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, hello, Ferdinando from Italy. So basically, we identified 5 main points in our discussion in order to improve the cooperation of the commissioner with civil society and also with the Committee of Ministers and the court. So concerning the civil society, we thought that the commissioner should improve the follow-up of its initiatives or its activities at the national level. This in order to show national institutions that the issues are at stake are still on the desk, and also to support the activities of civil society lobbying or conducting advocacy activities at domestic level. The second issue is somehow related to the first, and it is the formalization of the cooperation with civil society, and so the creation of more institutionalized communication flows with civil society organizations, always in order to improve this cooperation, in order to improve the effectiveness of the cooperation. The third point, still under the umbrella of the relations with the civil society organizations, was a suggestion by Hannah, who said that the commissioner should create better dissemination campaigns of his recommendations in order to make them more known among not only among the civil society organizations, but also among citizens. And the fourth point, still suggested by Anna, was the creation of, was the setup of a platform monitoring the space given at national level by civil society, given at national level to civil society organizations and human rights defenders, which at the moment does not exist. And our last point relates with more with the relations that the commissioner has with the court and with the committee of ministers. And the proposal is to improve the information flows between the commissioner and the civil society when the commissioner decides to select cases to be presented, to select cases in which the commissioner wants to submit an amicus curiae or a Rule 9 submission. The commissioner should, let's say, should gather more information, more detailed information at national level. So again, it should improve the communication flows with civil society organizations and with human rights defenders in order to improve the quality of his submissions or his amicus curiae. That's all.
Well, thank you for this very nicely structured summary. So the second room was the Commissioner's reactions and urgent responses. Who's the spokesperson for that group?
Well, I was chairing the group. There was no specific spokesperson selected. There were notes taken, but I will mention the key points that were made in the discussion. Much of it, started looking at the cases of Georgia in the case of, a chronic or, a rapid deterioration of human rights situation over the last year or so. And at the situation in Ukraine, where you can speak of a chronic, crisis situation that exists for a long time already in relation to the war. In the case of Georgia, it was said that the recent visit by the commissioner had been useful and appreciated by civil society and seen as, a reinforcement of things that they had been saying. When looking at the question whether this was not, there could have been an earlier intervention by the commissioner or by, presumably also by other bodies of the Council of Europe during the past year, because there were clear signals, of threats to the observance of human rights and democracy. This was, obviously from the side of civil society in Georgia, the role of the commissioner was not, the office of the commissioner was not seen as a logical, immediate body that would have to take this role or that could take this role. But I think you can say that the Council of Europe as a whole presumably was underperforming in this stage in the deterioration process. This relates to something that was said later in the discussion about the importance of good coordination between the different, possible actors on the Council of Europe side. There you have Secretary General, you have Parliamentary Assembly, you have the Commissioner, you have the Committee of Ministers, and a coordinating role of a clearer coordinating role and or coordinated approach would be presumably good, where you would work together towards certain objectives. Then, going back to a country situation of Ukraine, I was referring to it as an example of a chronic crisis, but in Ukraine at the moment, you have a much more urgent issue of civil society, big parts of civil society work being defunded, maybe temporarily, maybe permanently, because of the US freeze on foreign aid. This will lead to many of the partners on the ground of the Commissioner and of the Council of Europe as a whole not being available anymore. It will lead to overall deterioration of the importance of human rights and human rights related issues in public and political debate in Ukraine. Some people will go to the army that are at the moment working on these subjects. The question, translating this to impossible reactions by the Commissioner, you could imagine, people, including the Commissioner, calling for a big offensive in the soft sense, in the non-military sense of the word, by European states to make up for at least part of the shortfall that has occurred because of the cutting of US funding. At the moment, I think there is, the big question for bodies such as the Council of Europe that, pretend to be human rights and democracy defenders that are not directly US linked, is whether there could be this type of call and this type of initiative. Again, the question is should there be a role for the Commissioner? But maybe, the Commissioner is an independent body that has a very broad mandate, we have learned. So maybe there could and there should be this role to stand up for in this way in times when, much civil society work for human rights is under pressure. This is it.
Okay, thank you. So there was no fourth room, I was just informed. So we only have one room left, cooperation with other Council of Europe bodies. Anka, you were moderating it. Can you summarize it shortly? And you're still muted.
Just 1 minute. Yes. Can you hear me all right? Yes. So, to be honest, the conclusion of our discussions were rather pessimistic and even frustrating for me, because we did not really identify a way to strengthen the Commissioner's relationship with the other bodies, the other Council of Europe's bodies in a constructive and useful way. It was said that the Commissioner is the body which is probably best placed to criticize states and to draw attention to important issues or emergency situations. And sometimes this could lead other organs to pay attention to what's happening, to what's going on in some countries. The Committee of Ministers does not appear to be in a position to support the Commissioner effectively and visibly. For political and diplomatic obvious reasons, it cannot really criticize states too openly, which is very sad. and particularly when it comes to states such as Turkey or Azerbaijan or Russia before 2022. It was also said that the Commissioner has been invited to take part in thematic debates at the Committee of Ministers, and he has sometimes been quite awkward because he has criticized quite openly some states, quite openly and directly some states. The Parliamentary Assembly has not always been very responsive either. We talk about the comparison between the reactions of the Commissioner and PAS and the Secretary General regarding the democratic backsliding in Hungary and Poland. And these examples tend to show that the Parliamentary Assembly is not always able to back up the Commissioner for political reasons. And lastly, it was said that third-party interventions and Rule 9 communications are very useful tools. And in the case of the latter, namely in the case of Rule 9 communications, it can be a roundabout and non-public way of trying to influence the Committee of Ministers, a way for the Commissioner to influence the Committee of Ministers, but in a non-public way. Liz, maybe you can complement if I have
no, I think that
forgotten something.
Discussions rather well, although I mean Rule 9 submissions are public, so it is somehow public, you know, what is being put in these submissions. But just a short side note. So we have some time for some plenary discussions, either perhaps in response to what was reported about the discussions in the breakout rooms, or perhaps points that haven't been covered so far in any of the speeches or in the breakout rooms. And you can put your questions or remarks in the chat, or I guess we can also have some time to also respond. Oh, and Andrew Ford is saying maybe a reaction from Niels. Well, if you'd like to, yeah.
The background there, what the Committee of Ministers does and what PACE does, and the Commissioner is much freer to stand on principle, and doesn't have to negotiate with states or with PACE delegations and so on, and can take much more principled stands than the others. You know, so it's a question of how effectively you know, the Commissioner can engage with the Secretary General in particular, and it's not easy, as I said, because it's an unusual setup, you know, where the SG is the political head of the organization, and the Commissioner is supposed to stand on principle, but you know, there's some small tensions there that have to be, you know, that have to be managed. With PACE, you know, PACE, let's be honest, PACE is you know, there are a few PACE members who are really active and committed, and Boris Silevich here is was one of them. But for the most part, they're weekend warriors that come in 4 times a year for a few days. And there are some really committed people who become rapporteurs. But then when it comes to criticizing an important country, that's where politics enters, and the delegations really mobilize and kind of defend their countries and in general and so on, except for the, you know, opposition deputies. So there's a lot of politics there. It's not a pure human rights game. The Commissioner can play a pure human rights game, but the Commissioner has to be politically astute, you know, to work with these other bodies and leverage their role, their influence, as well as leveraging the court and the kind of the monitoring mechanisms. You know, sometimes the court and the monitoring mechanisms don't think politically enough. I'll give an example. I had a discussion with the then head of the European Court of Human Rights, and I said, listen, why aren't you looking at the foreign agent law cases now. They're really important. They're foundational. If you don't look at these soon, we'll be in big trouble. He says, oh, this section of the court has prioritized Article 2 and 3 violations. I said, well, you soon won't have any applications on Article 2 and 3 violations because there will be no more civil society in Russia to bring them to the court. He was like, oh, really? Oh, yeah, you're right. So the court sometimes thinks in very abstract legalistic terms. They're not engaged in what's going on the ground. So the commissioner has this unique role, and if the commissioner is politically astute, they can have a lot of influence, but it's a political as well as a human rights position. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, thank you. I think that Konstantin Maranov was or has been raising his hand for some time already, and we'll then get to Ferdinando's remark in the chat. So, Konstantin, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Actually, have a couple of questions, maybe for clarification and for information, and I hope that well, probably Nils can answer that based on his experiences in the role. Speaking about the cooperation with other parts of the Council of Europe, well, one of the things that we at the QA team thought about was actually that the interaction between the Commission and the Committee of Ministers at the moment appears to be quite formalistic. There are kind of quarterly reports from the Commissioner's office presented to the Committee of Ministers, and well, as we hear, there is some discussion happening, well, but mostly states commenting either in support of the Commissioner's work or criticizing certain aspects of this work if they don't like what the Commissioner was doing on their own country mostly. The group mentioned, or Nils mentioned, thematic debates sometimes when the Commissioner is invited, but when we look at the resolution on the mandate of the Commissioner, there is a point that the Commissioner can raise issues before the Committee of Ministers, address whenever the Commissioner deems it appropriate a report concerning a specific matter to the Committee of Ministers or to the Parliamentary Assembly and the Committee of Ministers. So, and we kind of interpreted this point in a way that the Commission actually has a power to initiate an exchange with the Committee of Ministers on his or her own initiative. I see Nils shaking the head. So probably this has never happened before, but could it be interpreted this way, do you think? And should we be kind of trying to advocate for that? For instance, when the Commissioner kind of exhausted all the means at his or her disposal, dealing with a certain member state and just wants to bring the issue of persistent non-cooperation to the attention of the Committee of Ministers. This kind of extreme cases to request being put on the agenda of the Ministers' Deputies meeting and have a kind of urgent exchange on that. And the second smaller question, but along the same lines, is when Rule 9 submissions are being made by the Commissioner's office, is there any exchange with the member states concerning the content of these submissions? I mean, now there is an established practice of civil society briefings. Well, when NGOs that made their submissions under Rule 9 informally engage with the delegations and can provide more information, can discuss the ways of dealing with the case. Has anything similar happened with regard to the Commissioner submissions at the CM? And is there any potential there, do you think? Thank you.
Yeah, Niels, would you like to respond? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Claudia might, since the possibility of Rule 9 submissions came at the very end of my mandate, I'm not really able to speak on that. Maybe Claudia wants to jump in on that.
And any comment about the first question?
Yeah, sure. I think it would be strange for the commissioner to ask, for a special meeting with a committee of ministers. I don't know if it would work. It might backfire. Regarding non-cooperation of states, as I said, different commissioners have had different approaches, and the commissioner's office will probably never come clean publicly and say this country and this country and this country are not cooperating with me, because it makes them look weak, and it might undermine the mandate. It might give bad ideas to other countries. I did it with Russia because it was a pretty extreme case. I tried over and over and over again, and the Russian representation was just wasting my time, and I got really angry, and I decided that was the only way to go forward. I'm pretty sure my successors have had more instances of non-cooperation, but I don't think you'll read about them publicly, and I don't think it's probably raised in the Committee of Ministers. And then a number of countries friendly to the commissioner then admonish the relevant country and say, we encourage you to cooperate. It might even be in a CM decision, but that's about as far as it'll go, I think. Yeah, I mean, this issue of but you also have a kind of very formalistic cooperation from countries. For example, at the end of my mandate, I think Hanna Maczynska can probably attest to this. I wanted to go to Poland quite often, and in the end, nobody would meet with me. No official would meet with me. I'd get very low level meetings. That's what happens more often, is not that you get refused a visit, but that they don't really engage with you at a serious level. Yeah, so the non-cooperation is a big problem, and my assumption is it's growing because of the number of countries that are backsliding.
Yeah, and I don't know if Claudia would like to respond to the Rule 9 question posed by Konstantin.
Yes, thank you. I would have to make sure that I got it right. So there's a suggestion that in addition to a written submission that is public by the commissioner, there would be an engagement by the commissioner in the sense of a briefing like the civil society organization do. Is this what is proposed? I mean, and in this case, I can just say that indeed Rule 9 were introduced in 2017, and this has not happened. For the moment, we have submitted a written communication.
Yeah, it was not a suggestion, but basically a question if this was happening.
No, this hasn't happened. Yeah.
But do you think it might be feasible? And well,
I can refer to the office.
If that's up to you to make this comment, yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't. We would have to go back to the Rule 9. That is of the Committee of Ministers. I mean, there is the rules that are applicable, and but I can mention it for sure to the commissioner and the office, and we can maybe go back for a reply to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there were 2 more points raised in the chat. I would like to shortly address these 2 points and then wrap up since we're approaching 12 o'clock. So Ferdinando said, well, one topic that we could perhaps also discuss is the relationship between the commissioner and national human rights institutions, because that hasn't been covered extensively yet. I don't know if there's someone who would like to comment on this point, who has like concrete ideas. Yes, yeah.
Yes, I can. I mean, I think the NHRIs, of course, are a diverse bunch. The commissioner, at least in my time, and I think in Dunja's time, and under Michael O'Flaherty as well, sees NHRIs as being really important partners. to engage with, to support, to try to defend if they're under attack. I did that on a number of occasions. And I think that relationship is critical. That said, NHRI's ombudsman and national human rights, equality bodies, they're not always independent. Some of them are, and they're not always very effective. So it depends on the country, and it depends on the people, the institution. You have to look closely. Some of them actually worked against. I can give the example of Denmark, when the National Human Rights Institution of Denmark, when I wrote a very critical report on Denmark, they actually attacked me and criticized me and undermined me. Thankfully, there's been a leadership change in the Danish Institute for Human Rights. But if you go back and look what they said about my work, and that was picked up by the CM and PACE, by the Danish ambassador and by Danish members of parliament. So it's not always a case that they're an ally. The question about the criticism of choice of countries, yeah, I mean, they're always. I remember when I came in, my predecessor had done a lot of work on Italy, and the ambassador was highly critical of, oh, you want to come to Italy again? Everybody likes to come to Italy. Why is it? It's not because of our human rights situation. It's because you want to hang out in Rome and Florence and Venice and so on. And it was much easier for me to defend my choice because I went to every country. I went to all 47 member states. Once, I went to 40 twice, and I went to Ukraine 7 times and to Turkey 5 times. So it was hard for them to I didn't leave much space for them to criticize me. I think it's if a commissioner decides not to do that and decide to be much more selective, then they'll be open to the why aren't you being fair and impartial and so on and so forth. But I think that would be more for Dunja Mijatovic to answer, or for Michael. But Michael's only started recently, so it's a different situation.
Well, thank you for your response. I don't see any things in the chat that we haven't covered. I don't see any hands either. So I would like to wrap up. Thank you very, very much for all your contributions and the different presentations and your participation also in the breakout rooms. It has been, I'm sure, very useful for CURE, who will now work on a report that will be published in about a month. And will, of course, be made public and also sent to you. PACE, or not PACE, CURE may get in touch with you for additional questions for information. If there are any points that pop up in your mind afterwards, please contact CURE also about this, because this is still work in progress, so that we can keep the conversation going, so to say. So thank you once more for this very useful workshop, and we of course hope to see you in the future again for other workshops and events organized by CURE.